All right, so the last presentation for Unit 2 is over urbanization, so just over the rapid urban growth over the years. So looking at this chart, we can see over the past really 116 years how much population has changed and where they're shifting to and what's projected to be in the year 2050. So in 1900, 90% of all the people in the world lived in rural areas. Rural means that you're in the countryside, so mainly farmers and things of that sort. Only 10% lived in cities. And then throughout the 1900s, we see this massive growth into cities. So people are leaving the countryside to go to the city because the city offers or promises better pay, basically. You're going to make more money working in a factory than you would farming. Of course, the problem is usually there's not enough jobs in these cities that these people move to provide for everybody moving there. By the year 2007, about half the world's population was in the city and half of it was in the countryside. And then by the year 2050, it's projected that 75% of the world's population will be in urban areas, while 25% will be in the countryside. Now keep in mind, we've talked about population at this point. Population is increasing at a dramatic rate. It's growing exponentially. But then you have the problem of all these people moving to cities, and people that live in cities, they rely on people that are farmers to provide for them. We're going to need more food in 2050. We're going to need more food for all these people now living in cities that can't produce food for themselves. And so that's going to be a stress on our population, is how are we going to get food to an increasing population, especially when this increasing population is now in the city. And then how are we going to have enough jobs for all these people? Keep in mind that most of this is happening, as you'll see on the next slide here, most of this is happening in the poorer countries of the world. So you have people that don't have a high education moving into these cities that are already stricken with poverty. Putting stress on the infrastructure. You can't build sewage systems, electricity, running water, things like that. You can't keep up with the demand of all the people moving in all at one time. And so the infrastructure can't keep up, and that also means the systems can't keep up. Education can't keep up with all the people moving in. Law enforcement, there is no law enforcement in a lot of these towns, in the barrios, in the slum areas of these cities. It's like the Wild West. I mean, it's just wide open. And so that's why organized crime can take hold so easily in some of these cities. So this is a huge problem that affects everybody. I mean, even though a lot of these cities that are seeing huge growth is in a different part of the world than we live in, except for Mexico City and Sao Paulo. But this is going to put stress on our economy as well and our ability to provide for everyone around the world. So this right here is looking at the world's fastest growing cities. Now this goes up through 2015, so this was made a while back, but it was projected through 2015 when they produced this, that this is how many new residents per hour that these cities were getting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week through the year 2015. So I mean, look at this, 58 people per hour in Lagos, 24 people per hour in Cairo, Mumbai, 42 people per hour, Dhaka, 50. And Dhaka's in Bangladesh, which is an extremely poor country. And then I'm just going to, of course, in China as well, Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, just massive amounts of people going in as well. And so, I mean, look, there's Kabul, Afghanistan. These places are extremely poor. And so the ability to provide for these people is just non-existent. All right, so the term urbanization, what this refers to is the recent dramatic growth in cities and lifestyle changes, basically, over this period of time. It isn't just happening around the world. It's happening here in the U.S. as well, where we're seeing certain urban areas grow extremely fast, and you happen to live in one of them. DFW area is one of the fastest growing areas in the entire country. City of Denton is the 6th fastest growing city in America right now. McKinney is, I think, a little bit higher than that, around 3 or 4. They kind of fluctuate a little bit. Frisco, of course, and then Flower Mountain has grown exponentially over the past 15, 20 years. And so you're seeing it happen right around you as well. And so as far as the metropolitan area goes, we live in what we call the Metroplex, which is a term for a metropolis or a metropolitan area. All those terms are kind of interchangeable. Metroplex is generally just for DFW. I think there's one other place I've heard it used for, but generally it's just this area that we call Metroplex. Otherwise, it's a metropolis. All right, you need to know these functional regions. We talked about different types of regions, functional, perceptual, things like that. So a functional region, of course, serves a purpose. So there's 3 parts to a functional region of a metropolitan area. You got your central cities. So that's the main city. So in our case, it would be Dallas. Now, Fort Worth, of course, is a big city as well. But Dallas is the main financial hub of DFW. So that's your central city. Your suburbs are your political units surrounding the city. This is Flower Mound. So a lot of the people live in suburbs They live on the outskirts of the central city, but a lot of them drive into the central city for work. And so these are mainly homes and things like that that you're going to see there in the suburbs. And then exurbs are places that are smaller towns that there's a little countryside in between the main metropolitan area and where those towns are, but they're still connected to the metropolitan area. They still rely on them. People commute from these exurbs into the metropolitan area and work, but they just haven't been included yet. So like Flower Mound used to be an exurb, but as DFW expanded north, it became a suburb. Frisco used to be an exurb. Now it's a suburb. There's towns that are exurbs right now that soon will be suburbs. Salina, Texas is growing extremely fast. That will be a suburb eventually. Right now it's an exurb. Melissa, Texas, near McKinney, is an exurb, but soon, very soon, it's going to be a suburb. And so basically, as the metropolitan area grows, these exurbs that are on the edges eventually become suburbs of the central city. So here's a map. So you can see, so yeah, Dallas is the main city. So like Plano, Carrollton, Coppell, Grapevine, Farmount Highland Village, all of these are suburbs. And then Allen used to be an exurb, now it's a suburb. Now the exurbs, so these are places where there's a little bit of space in between, would be like Rockwall, Caddo Mills, Justin, Boyd, Briar, Springtown, Reno, Azle, Aledo, not Burleson, Oakleaf, Ferris, Combine, Kaufman, Terrell. So basically all these kind of along the edges, for the most part, would be exurbs. But as long as you're in the central area from Denton going down I-35 through Dallas, across over to Fort Worth, all of that is part of either a suburb or, of course, Dallas would be the central city. All right, so again, urban geography. So you got your central city, which is Dallas, your suburbs like Flower Mound, they're connected to the central city, and the exurbs, that there's a little bit of space in between them, but they're still connected to the main metropolitan area, or metropolis, or metroplex, all meaning the same thing. All right, and then some more key terms. So inside the central city, you have the core of the central city, the downtown area. The downtown area is called the Central Business District, the CBD. You need to know this. So CBD is always the downtown area, and that's the main business hub. So that's where most people work. Like downtown Houston, for example, 800,000 people work in downtown Houston. So that's where everything's happening. And then this is referring to zoning. There's an old game called SimCity. You're probably too young to even know what it is. But in there, you would build a city and stuff like that. And you have zoning. And zoning is designing a city and trying to develop its growth in a logical way. So you decide where are the residential places going to be built, where the industrial place is going to be, and then commercial. So residential, think you have different types of housing. Where are you going to put the trailer homes? Where are you going to put the lower end apartments? Where are you going to put the higher end apartments? Low end housing, middle income housing, high end housing. The industrial areas, what kind of industry are we talking about? We're talking about like factories. Are they going to be emitting any kind of industrial waste? Where's that going to go? And where should that be positioned within the city and where people live? And then commercial, of course, is going to be like retail stores, restaurants. This is also going to be major businesses, office spaces, and things of that sort. So you have to decide, where to build these things, where it makes sense. Because as you do this, then you have to decide where you're going to put your roads. What highway systems do you need? Do you need a subway system? Do you need a bus system? Do you need taxis? Do you need Uber? Do you need all that stuff is going to come into play? Do you want to take up a lot of space and spread out like we do? Or do you want to build up and do high rises and things like that and keep everything compact and close together and have a city where people walk more so that way you can cut back on pollution? And then it's easier to control from a law enforcement standpoint to have just a smaller area to control instead of this larger area you have to take care of. So all that comes into play, and it gets really confusing. And then a megalopolis. This term is when you have several metropolitan areas that run together. And so you just go from one to the other, and the city basically never stops. And so a good example in the U.S. of this is what we would call boss wash. And that is this. So if you were to travel more so from Washington, you could include Richmond, but more so from D.C., if you go up I-95, you'll go into Baltimore, and then you go around to Philly, from Philly into New York City, and then as you get out of the New York City area, it stays city constantly until you get into the lower Massachusetts and you work your way into Boston. So this is constant city all along the coast here, all along I-95 from Washington to Boston. So this is a megalopolis. Just the New York area alone, New York City area, including parts of Long Island and this all this area here, part of New Jersey as well. There's 22 million people just right there. So I mean, this is millions of people along this route. All right, and then even though this goes back into economics, I just again want to hit infrastructure because it's so big, and we'll be talking about it so much. Because when you have all this population moving into cities, it's going to affect the infrastructure of the city, the ability to keep up. Like our area, it's growing so much, it's hard to keep up with the infrastructure. You know, we're trying to expand I-35 now and other highways and building other things. We've tried to add in some more public transportation like DART, but it's hard because we didn't build this area to be able to walk it. You have to have a car, and so, you know, how effective is that? And so the infrastructure is going to be greatly affected by growth and the ability to provide all these services to the people as they move into cities. So that's the basic idea of urban growth. When we get into the U.S. and Canada, we'll go into more detail about urban growth and urban sprawl and the effect it has on us. All right, so that's it for Unit 2. So, of course, you got a test coming up. Make sure you review all the notes. Obviously, watch the video for the test and go over that. Get your vocab done. Review it, and you should be good.